and what I described earlier, this is the era of the credit default swap, where the banks don't keep anything on the books at all. We've gone from a fractional reserve system to a zero reserve system. There's no reserves at all. The entire banking system is basically a hologram of mathematical probabilities and statistics that have no chance of ever succeeding. It's nothing but losing bets. And this is why you've got the problem of bank failures is still very, very much in the mainstream, very much with us. The banks are technically insolvent. You know, this is not just Max Keiser. Nouriel Roubini has made this point, the NYU professor who's on, many shows. Jim Rogers has made this point. Peter Lynch has made this point. He's been on your shows. This is no secret. The banks around the world are insolvent because they took that fractional reserve model where they only had to keep 10%, which gave them an incredible amount of profits. But they were so greedy that they said, we don't want to even keep 10%. We want to keep, we don't want to keep any reserves at all. We just want to have a mathematical formula that suggests the presence of a reserve under certain conditions. And they got regulators to sign off on that and say, your mathematical formula looks good to us. We'll give you an A rating. And then thus began this whole period of syndication of loans, a real syndicate like we've seen in a criminal syndicate. That's why I suggest that the only way to go after these guys is to bring back RICO, which is the anti-racketeering laws, the laws that took down Mike Milken and Drexel Burnham. Because Giuliani, who was a prosecutor at the time in New York, figured out that you couldn't just attack one piece of the system because it would just move to another part of the system. You have to attack the entire system. So the global banking system is corrupt with the banks plus the rating agencies, these guys who give bonds ratings, AA, AAA. They're completely corrupt. You have to go after the commercial banks, the federal banks, and the analysts, and the money managers, and take them all into court at the same time under RICO and prosecute the whole bunch of them. But, of course, that would mean an acknowledgement that the banks have absolutely zero collateral. And that's what the banks know this. And remember back in the last few months of the Bush administration, Hank Paulson, who was the Treasury Secretary, basically put a gun to the Bush administration's head and said, either you give us $700 billion or we're going to blow up the banking system. That's extortion.
Yeah, and they even threatened some members of Congress with martial law on the streets if they didn't pass that TARP package.
That's extortion.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
That's extortion, and now it's already mushroomed to $11-12 trillion. So they're threatening. They're using the fact that they've got they're holding weapons of mass financial destruction, as Warren Buffett calls them. They're threatening to pull the pin on the grenade of these derivatives. If the American people don't give them hundreds of billions of dollars, not to save the system, because the money's not going into the economy. It's not helping the economy. It's just paying off these guys' salaries. So it's an extortion racket. And, think of it, if in fact this $10 or $12 trillion has been dumped into the system, think of it this way. If that money was, the government could have wiped clean every credit card debt in America, every Visa debt, every MasterCard debt, every American Express debt, and just said, okay, you're getting a debt holiday. We're wiping all of your credit cards clean. Immediately, people would have started to shop again, and this crisis would have been over. The reason they didn't do that is because right now the economy would be growing again, and the Federal Reserve Bank would have to start raising interest rates to deal with the growth. But, of course, high interest rates are the enemy of the banks who are engaging in all this backroom dealing with credit default swaps and other derivatives. They love low interest rates because they want the cost of borrowing to be as cheap as possible, so they don't like high interest rates.
And they want that because they want us to be in eternal debt. That's why they wouldn't give us a debt holiday, and that's why they, want low interest rates to sucker people in.
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, the low interest rates are great for them, but like I said, it's financial Jim Crow laws. It's not like you and I can get 1% on our loans. We're still paying 16, 17, 18%. Mm-hmm. They're getting 1% on the wholesale market from, in Japan, for example, and these other areas where you can borrow money very, very cheaply. I made a film for Al Jazeera English called Money Keiser. I went up to Iceland a year before that economy collapsed. And I did a film about what's called the yen carry trade, where the people in Iceland were borrowing money from Japan at 1%, and then they were able to mark it up and make loans out of 15%. So they were making a 14% spread, which is completely artificial and unsustainable. And I went to the bankers and I said, this is going to blow up. Within a year, your economy is going to blow up, and your currency is going to blow up. And they looked at me and they said, no, that's not going to happen, because here in Iceland, every man and woman is worth 3. We're supermen. And they weren't using it metaphorically. They weren't trying to be glib. They actually believed that they had supernatural abilities. That's how
that's how delusional some people are
during these bubbles. Is that people? It becomes intoxicating when you're making fast, sudden wealth syndrome. When you're making money quickly, it's very intoxicating, and you believe you're like these hedge funds. You believe you are God.
Yeah, and these people are totally out of control. And they do believe they're untouchable, and in many cases it looks like they are. I don't see anybody being prosecuted for all this. Final segment on the other side with Max Keiser, maxkeiser.com, piratemyfilm.com. It's the InfoWarrior. We'll be back after this. Final segment with Max Keiser. Max, a lot of people are asking me, what happens if the dollar does die? Someone's got $100,000 in the bank, and then the dollar just collapses, and we go to another currency. I mean, do they get anything? Is it just, wheelbarrows worth of money worth nothing, and we got to start all over again? They're taking everybody's house. What will happen?
So basically, what will happen is you'll have $100,000 in the bank. They'll replace it with a new currency, and you'll have $100,000 of that new currency. Mm-hmm. You go to the store, and the day before you paid $5 for a loaf of bread, but today you're paying $15 for a loaf of bread. So it shows up in prices. The quantity of the money you have, it'll be the same, except the prices will be triple, because that doesn't happen when you devalue the currency. Look at the history of Argentina. Look at the history of Zimbabwe. When you devalue the currency, the prices, it takes more of that currency to buy the same stuff. So your purchasing power collapses, is what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So your buying power is over.
Well, I've got this money in my pocket. How, you can't have my money. I'm not going to give you my money. I'm not going to take any different kind of a money, That's not the way it's done. The money itself is devalued, and when you go to buy stuff, the prices are double, triple, quadruple. So everything's going to cost more. It's devalue. They have to devalue. The dollar is no longer competitive on the world markets. It's being artificially supported by the creation of more debt. So the dollar is backed by debt, not backed by trade. The economy is made up of consumption, which is using borrowed money to consume stuff, and military. Those are the two main components of the American economy. Americans are donuts and guns. That's the American economy. Now, it's all fueled by borrowed money, and that borrowed money spigot is being cut off. Mm-hmm. And the creditors of America are saying, we don't want your dollars anymore. And we're saying, well, the only way we can do that is by revaluing this currency. And the easiest way to revalue the currency is to issue a new currency, which has a new relationship to the other world currencies. So the dollar will lose an incredible amount of its value against other currencies, like the Norwegian krona will be worth more because they've got oil, for example. Gold would be worth more because it's actually got value, a storehouse of value. The U.S. dollar would be worth a lot less. If you're holding U.S. dollars, you're the chump at the poker table. People should get out of debt, and they should diversify out of U.S. dollars. They should have other currencies, including gold. And this way, when they come in and they devalue the currency, they're not going to get hurt as badly It's a way to protect yourself.
What happens
against
to
what has to be done?
What happens to the money that we owe China then? I mean, they've loaned us, as far as I know, trillions of dollars. What happens to that debt?
Well, the debt. What happens with China is that as the dollar gets devalued, China stops lending. Stops the lending spigot. They take a hit, but they're able to recycle that money within their own economy, and they still have a functioning manufacturing capability, and they would go through a downturn, but they would still have the ability to weather the storm. Whereas in the U.S., because we've outsourced all of our manufacturing, and the economy is now at one point up to 45% of the entire economy is just comes from Wall Street, comes from the financialization of the economy. Once you blow that away, you're left holding nothing. So then the U.S. has no competitive ability.